Thank you for joining another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. Today's episode is called Blaze Your Own Trail, Defy All Odds. In this episode, we have the privilege of listening to Jordan Mendoza, the CEO and founder of Blaze Your Own Trail. We learn about his early beginnings and how he has been able to overcome so many obstacles, both personal and professional. We discovered that this dedication and tenacity allowed him to achieve creating his own successful venture. We learn how he manages to pivot in a virtual environment during this 2020 pandemic. Welcome Jordan Mendoza. Let's get started. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of Success Innovation. Thank you so much to the audience, to the viewers, to the listeners. This is a YouTube video episode as well as a audio version of the podcast. And today I'm really happy to welcome Jordan Mendoza, who is the founder of his own podcast called Blaze Your Own Trail. He is also a sales and training professional with over 25 years of experience in sales and marketing. He also has 14 years of multifamily housing industry. Welcome, Jordan Mendoza to Success Innovation. How are you this evening, sir?
Hey, Lazaro. First off, thanks so much for the opportunity. So happy to be here.
No, thank you for making this a reality for me to actually interview you. Can you kind of give me a little brief summary of who you are, your early stages, where you were born, your experience growing up, and then the most fondest memory as a child?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, so Portland, Oregon, and I've got kind of a unique situation. So my mom was actually born with one lung, and this was back in 1958. And if you know anything about the 50s, the technology wasn't that great right back then. So essentially, if something like that occurred, the doctors basically said, listen, you probably won't live past 18, and you definitely won't be able to have any kids, But my mom was just one of those people that was a fighter, even though she had to use oxygen most of her life, she still didn't look at her disability as disabling her, right? She still was trying to be as active as she could. She got, me and my brothers into lots of different sports, and she figured out how to do different side hustles to make money, whether it was going to play bingo or going to the Greyhound races, figuring out ways to get money, because really it was, food stamps or disability, right? That's the income that you have. So she was very creative, but also she was a very kind person, had a good sense of humor, was big into sports. So she got all of us kids, involved in sports, and she passed away in 2012, but, they told her she wouldn't live past 18. She lived to 54.
Right.
They told her she wouldn't have any kids. She had 5 boys, which one of them she actually had after she was 40 years old. So, you look at the hand she was dealt, wasn't a very good hand, but she made the most of it. And she taught us how to be kind and empathetic and, all of those really good values that I carry with me today. Awesome. And, my dad was an immigrant from the Philippines. He migrated to the U.S. in the early 80s. And, he grew up in a province called Nueva Vizcaya. It's in northern Luzon, Philippines. And, he worked on the rice fields when he was 7, right? So he learned hard work at a very early age, and after school went into the military and became a seaman, and eventually, came over to the U.S. for that American dream, right? He wanted to figure out a way to start his own business. And so he got a job with a landscaping company for a couple of years, and then eventually started his business, which he's had for over 40 years. And some things that he's taught me in life are, make sure that you're always working hard. You're always trying to be better, tomorrow than you were today, right? Always have that tenacity in that fight. And so a lot of who I am has really stemmed from different pieces of them. As you get older, you think about people that influence you and how they've affected your life, how they've shaped who you are. And, those are really the traits that I get from them, that I get from my parents. But Yeah. So childhood wise, we didn't grow up in that great of neighborhoods. It was definitely all kinds of crazy things that would happen, and didn't have a whole lot of money. So I think from uh, being born till 14, we probably moved more than 15 times. A lot of moving around, and I didn't know why when I was a kid. You don't understand. You're just like, oh, we're going to live at this new place. So it doesn't really affect you that much. But in hindsight, of course, we probably couldn't afford it, so we had to figure out, a different place to be. But yeah. So when I met my dad, actually for the first time, I was 12 years old. I didn't hadn't meet him. I think I met him maybe when I was 2. Didn't remember it, of course. And so that was an interesting experience. Growing up in Portland, and then he lived out in D.C. So I would actually go out to meet him for the first time at 12 years old, and that was a really crazy experience because you grow up with your family, and now you have this whole other family. He had remarried and had a couple kids, and and they lived a different life. Like, he had his own business, so he had money, so it was very interesting going from where I was at to here, where now we're going to Six Flags and he's buying me what like, it was just a very interesting experience. And I remember I'm almost feeling bad, for my brother, that they weren't getting to experience that side of things. So that was very interesting, when I actually made it back that summer from spending a few months there. Um, I would say that childhood was good. I learned a lot of lessons. You think about the formative years, and really for me, coming from adolescence up through to my youth and into my late teens, I had 3 pivotal moments that occurred in my life that really give me a unique perspective. And in 4th grade, it was the last day of the year. It was a picnic. We're celebrating the end of the year. We were at a park called Pier Park. We were playing baseball. I get up to bat. I swing the bat. I spin around, like you see in the movies. The bat flies under a tree, and I go to pick it up. I stand up. There's a beehive on top of my head.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting stung. I'm running. Kids are running away from me because there's a swarm chasing me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just a crazy scene. If you can imagine what someone being stung by bees and other people running away. And finally, I get over to the teachers. They had these picnic tables with big coolers, and they started dumping these coolers on me and swatting the bees and pulling them out. But I got stung 53 times
Wow.
in 4th grade.
Well,
I mean,
you figured out that you're not allergic to bees. So.
That's right. I figured that out, or we wouldn't be having this conversation, right?
Of course, yes.
And so that was pivotal moment 1, right, in 4th grade. So fast forward 3 years to 7th grade, we had moved again. No surprise, right? We moved from one part of town to a place where it was about 2 public bus rides away, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know in miles, maybe 15 miles away or something like that, but I didn't want to go to the school in that neighborhood because it was the worst neighborhood than I was in. So I convinced my mom to let me take the public bus. And of course she did some trial runs with me to make sure I knew the route. And she was very good at communication and talking to people. So she made friends with the lady at the 7-Eleven that I would be stopping at waiting for the next bus. She was very strategic in that sense. So it was in 7th grade. I was on my normal route. I caught the bus at my apartment community, took it over about 20 minutes to the 7-Eleven, and then I had about a 30-minute wait. And every day I would go in and play Mortal Kombat 2. It was the arcade game in the store. That was my go-to game, right? And so I'm playing the game one day, and I hear the door chimes of the 7-Eleven like they do, and I hear a man's voice, and he says, "Hey, Daniel." And I just heard it. I'm playing my game, but I'm not Daniel, so I have no reason to turn around. That's not who I am. I just remember hearing this voice. And as I'm playing, all of a sudden I get lifted up, like I feel my body being lifted. I'm shoved against the Terminator 2 pinball machine the gun was the trigger. So my ribs get shoved into that, and I start getting punched. And I look behind me, and it's a male police officer, and he's literally beating me, and he throws me on the ground, and he like twists my arms around and handcuffs me. And the lady that knows my mom and knows me is saying, his name's not Daniel, that is Jordan, he's in here every day. And the lady cop is yelling at her saying, shut up or we're going to arrest you too. And they take me to the cop car.
Wow.
I mean, crazy situation. And I kept saying, listen, my name's not Daniel, it's Jordan. Like, look in my pocket of my jacket, I have my homework in there. And finally, for whatever reason in that moment, the guy stopped and he got my jacket. He grabs the paper. He sees my name on it. And you could just see his face. It was like he saw a ghost. Mm-hmm. And he's like, crap, like we screwed up here. You know, mm-hmm. They were looking for a Hispanic runaway, you know, mm-hmm. and for one, I'm not Hispanic, right? My father's from the Philippines. My mom's Irish, and then Chippewa, Indian, Native American. But again, a lot of people think that I am, right? Because I have a certain look. But again, you know, this is one of those situations where this happens and they call my mom and say there was a misunderstanding. You know, they didn't, divulge everything that happened. But of course, the lady saw everything. It was on camera. You know, we had all of that. And so, you know, everything went to court. They lost their jobs, which is what I wanted. I didn't want to take this thing to try to get any settlement or anything like that. For me, you know, I knew that they were bad people, right? Because I think there's bad people, and bad people work in lots of different positions, not just police officers, right? There's bad teachers, there's bad doctor. I mean, there's bad every type of position, because it's not the position or the job, right? And I knew that. I had that self-awareness at 12, and really I just wanted that closure. I wanted that to be done, you know? Right. So you fast forward from there 7 years. At 19 years old, I had gotten a job in California. I was doing sales. We were getting ready. We're pumped. We're going to open a new office out in New Jersey. So we're making this drive, and we're taking the scenic route. You know, we're young. I'm 19. There's some 21-year-old. You know, it's this caravan of cars, and we end up going towards, you know, Salt Lake City and to Phoenix and Vegas, and we kind of make our way through the country until we hit I-80, which actually stretches all across the United States. And we're driving. It's late, or really early in the morning, if you will, around 4 something in the morning. We're in Wyoming. I'm in the back seat of a Chevy King cab, and it was one of those where you could sit forward or you can turn sideways. And I was turned sideways because there were boxes and stuff. So I felt like it was easier to sit like that. I'd fallen asleep. I woke up to my friend, the driver. He wakes up because he fell asleep at the wheel. He overcorrects himself. We start sliding at 70 miles an hour, and then the truck just starts to flip. And I'm just felt like slow motion. I was trying to hold on to the top and then yelling, and then the truck lands. Mm-hmm. And I get out, or my 2 friends get out, but the driver's gone. He gets ejected from the driver's side windshield, and he lands on the other side of the highway about 25 yards from where the truck landed. And he doesn't look like he's not moving. He doesn't look like he's in good shape. And I didn't even realize I was injured at this time because of the adrenaline. I mean, I got out of the vehicle, I stood up, but I reached down. I felt like something on my leg. I reached down, and my hand actually went in my leg. I had a cut about a fist deep and 12 inches long on my right leg, an 8-inch cut on my left. And I had to get rushed to the hospital. Our buddy got life flighted to another hospital in Casper. And I had, 52 staples. They told me I might not be able to walk, right? And so that was a, tough situation to deal with. But, I think about all of these situations, right, from 4th grade to being at 19. And what I've been learning over the years is, adversity really isn't for us to keep to ourselves, right? It's actually anything that we go through, any trial or struggle or adversity, it's meant to be shared with other people, with the hopes that they can maybe see things with a different light or a different perspective. Right. And adversity also, I believe, increases your emotional intelligence, and helps your ability to be able to handle emotions. When you experience trauma, it actually gives you an ability to handle certain emotions.
Wow, those are really pivotal moments, and those are really hard truths that a lot of people probably have not experienced to a certain degree. Like that seventh grader getting punched and confused with a student or a runaway, and getting picked up by the police by mistake and getting hurt. And then that incident when you're about 19 or 20 years old, where you get flipped over on a car and have that uh, injury to you, but also seeing those individuals that are friends of yours or co-workers getting hurt to that degree. That's a really interesting and powerful image that causes a memory, and that causes certain feelings to kind of get in imprinted into who you are as an individual. But obviously you learn off of them, and by that learning, you start to realize that you as an individual have to essentially brand who you are and share with the world, this is me, this is what I've lived, this is what I've experienced, and share that with the world. So what exactly is branding to you, and how do you get to it?
Well, I think branding, or if you look at it from the context of building a personal brand, it's really showcasing who you are.
Mhm.
Really, that's what it is. And listen, brand is synonymous with reputation, right? That's what you can really put those in the same category. And so do you want to be known as someone that isn't you, or do you want to be known for just being you as an authentic human, right? Like the way that you show up on a podcast is the same way you show up to your best friend's wedding, right? Like there shouldn't be any difference in how you show up in person, on camera, in writing. Like it's got to be you. And and it's what people remember, right? It's what people look forward to being around or seeing. It's all of it, because the brand, the goal really, if you were a brand, is to build a community, right? To build a network of people that you can add value to, because that's, from a content creation standpoint, what I do is I look for ways, how can I add value to my audience? How can I teach them something in a lane that I have information on, that will add value to them, that if they use this information, they could actually take action on it, and it could make them better in some way, right? And I think if you look at it from that point, right, not like what's in it for me, but what's in it for them, there's a lot of magic that can happen.
So when you first, that's at this maturity level, because that's when you realize that what how to brand yourself and what steps to take. But
Yep.
let's go back to the younger Brandon. You don't know, you are who you are regardless of where
Yep.
you go, but you don't know that you're branding yourself. You don't
Yep.
know the definition of branding. When do you recognize what actually branding is? And that gives you more of power to actually follow through and push your brand a little faster and with more emphasis and commitment. How does that happen for you?
It's very interesting, because if I look at it like in hindsight, right? If I think about when I was a kid, and the things that I did, whether it was selling candy bars and beef jerky for soccer, and how I love that feeling of walking up and asking somebody to buy something, right? Or selling baseball cards. I used to sell a lot of baseball cards. My great grandmother would buy them. I would go into little conferences, and there'd be people selling cards, and I would go and flip baseball cards. I would do the same thing with action figures back when I was younger. So I always had this knack for trying to figure out how to communicate with people in a certain way, right? And so I think about that, and I bring this up because I think that has to do with branding, right? I mean, if you're like, marketing is a part of sales. They're different, right? But the marketing is what gets to to the sale, right? And so I think I was, I had a lot of information around that just by seeing how people move, right? Body language and facial expressions. I picked up on that at a very young age. Now, if we think about it from like the professional branding standpoint, honestly, about 14 months ago, I logged into LinkedIn, right? Had the account forever. I think like a lot of people, it was where I was going to go if I got a promotion, right? Let's highlight a job or congratulate somebody else. And I log in April of 2019. And I think at that point I'd connected with maybe 7,000 people or 7,000 followers. And, because I had just done it. It wasn't something I focused on building a network. It wasn't something I was really, it wasn't on my radar, honestly. And I just started consuming content. I noticed a lot of people were creating video and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Like people are talking and doing these different things and being really creative. And it was heavy on content. And I said to myself, I was like, this platform has changed, right? And so I started consuming. I started coming up on different creators and influencers. I don't know if you're familiar with Justin or Brian Schulman. Familiar with Brian Schulman, right? So yeah, he does What's Good Wednesday. He does Shout Out Saturday. And I started consuming his content. And I was like, man, like this guy's super positive, right? Like he's not afraid to be on camera. I was like, maybe I should start, creating videos, And so, I actually reached out to him. I connected with him and he encouraged me. He's like, yeah, like you can absolutely do this. He's like, folks talk about things that like, he's like, sales, talk about that. I teach a 6-month leadership program. Like talk about those things. I teach on emotional intelligence and strengths-based leadership and conflict. So I just started creating, but it was so interesting because I actually got I had a goal that I had just got, I think in February, and I was trying to figure out, what social media platform I could use to help educate our on-site teams and our corporate teams. And that's kind of why I stumbled back onto LinkedIn in April. And my very first video that I ever posted was actually asking for people to help out with those strategies, right? And it was a terrible video. I don't think I was looking at the camera. It just was. I remember looking back how terrible it was and how focused I was on metrics. And, there was like 3 views and they were all me probably, right? And that's what I was really focused on. And then I started, something was flipping and it was like, listen, stop focusing on metrics and focus on creating, focus on showing up and showcasing the information that you have, right? And do it from that, how do I add value perspective? And when I did that and when I got consistent, I started noticing I would get a lot more people that wanted to connect with me. I was seeing there was an increase in people that were following me. There was an increase in engagement, like people were actually commenting on my content. And so, I knew that like, if I want to keep this audience, what do I have to do? I have to engage back with them. I have to thank them for saying something, right? So I would engage and before I knew it, the December rolls around and I hit like 20,000 followers, from April to December. And it was a big milestone, right? Like this is an NBA stadium full of people following you. Like you look at it from that context, and it was just very surreal to me that I was able to build that just doing what I love to do, right? What I like, love speaking, love communicating. Right. And, April rolls around, I doubled, I hit 40,000. And then now it's June and I'm, 52,000, I think I looked the other day. And it's just, it's weird to think about that, when you start creating the type of impact that you can make and that, there are people that are actually looking for your information, it still blows me away to this day because, to me, 14 months is not a very long time, right? It's not a very long time, but the interesting things that were happening as my brand was growing on the platform, of course, you start getting tagged. So people are like, follow this person. And so it was happening globally, like from all different time zones in the world, someone would be tagging me. And so people just kept following, like, okay, you tagged him, let me see who like view your profile, right? So those things start going up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people started reaching out to me because they were noticing like my content was getting a lot of engagement. And what are you doing? How are you, how is this happening? And so, people started asking for advice. What are you doing? How are you doing this? And so a few months passed by, and I was talking to my wife, and she's like, "Right, did you tell me that people are asking to pay you money to teach them something?" And I was turning everybody down. I was like, "Oh no, I've got a full-time job. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to do this." And then she's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Why are you telling people no?" Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
like there's plenty of Uber driver, like people driving Uber, people doing the side hustle. Like, why not? You have time in the evenings or on the weekends. Like, go ahead, start saying yeah. So I started saying yes, and I started consulting on different things, right? In the lanes that I have skill sets and information and some coaching and build how to build your brand, right? How to optimize your profile. So I started doing that, and then that just started building, and then January 1st I launched the Blaze Your Own Trail podcast, and
Right.
it's been live for 6 months. This yesterday I just dropped episode 31 in total for in the second season. It's been an incredible journey. I've never would have thought, if you would have asked me 6 months ago, I would have even a third of the guests that I've had on, right? Like, because it's a small community, and you just start meeting people, and you find out how amazing people are, and how they want to network, and how everybody wants to help each other. And that's just been it's been super rewarding. The show has been ranked in I think 4 or 5 different countries, which has been crazy to see that, to see it being impacted in other places other than the United States. And that's really why I created the show. It's to hear about people's journeys of how they got to success. So, like,
Right.
what did they have to go through? What were the trials? What were the lessons? And
Right.
then, what are some tips they can give about the information that they have to the audience to add even more value, right? And I think that's what it's all about, right?
Exactly.
As
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
you learn and grow, I think it's your responsibility to help others, because I know there's plenty of people that have helped me along the way. You don't move ahead, and you don't experience growth unless people are there to catch you when you fall and kick you when you need to be kicked, to help get you to that next level.
Right. So branding can be positively and negatively affecting in your career path in your person. So how can we, or from your experience, how can we avoid that negatively branding portion? How can we take the path more in the positive versus the negative?
Yeah, well, I think for one, make sure that you think about your content before you create it, right? Like,
Hmm.
if you think it's content that doesn't align with your values and your message,
Hmm.
that should be a good indicator that you probably shouldn't post it.
Right. Right.
And because you want to be you want people to see exactly who you are, and if all of a sudden your messaging shifts in a whole different direction that isn't in alignment with you, then that might confuse people, right? That actually might have people go, that doesn't that doesn't actually line up.
Right. Yeah. So people, your audience is very smart, and obviously they watch or they follow a certain individual because they like and they align with those values and those visions and missions. And if you all of a sudden start veering off, you're gonna start losing maybe that audience. But then it's up to you to determine, okay, do I want to really veer off onto this direction? Is this something that I want to continue pursuing? And you'll definitely start switching your own audience to follow you if that's what you really want to do. But yes, do be a conscientious individual when you're making that conscientious decision. So, what's the difference between branding and marketing ourselves?
Well, I mean, I think they're definitely both almost the same thing, right? Because if I'm marketing me or I'm building a brand, if you're building a brand, you are marketing, right? You're marketing yourself. So
Yeah.
I almost see them as uh, maybe not the same, but very similar, of course. So usually marketing has the goal at the end of the marketing is a sale, right? It is, you're building a relationship. You're giving people awareness of your brand through your marketing to get to an end point, which is typically a transact. And again, that end point might be free information. That endpoint might be them purchasing something from you. So, that's kind of where I see it.
Or getting a job offer, or
Yeah,
pursuing a
absolutely.
career, or an internship of sorts, or getting
Investors, right? I
mentorship.
mean, like, yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
there's a million reasons why you would market yourself, but
Right, right, right.
at the end of the day, marketing is creating awareness for your brand.
So for you, what actually helped you get to where you're at right now? I mean, you have a wife that kind of, you mentioned, has supported you, but you also have to have, to a certain extent, belief in who you are and your talents and your abilities. So what would you say to individuals that are possibly doubting themselves? How can you encourage them to go ahead and pursue that?
Yeah, well, I'm a super optimistic person, so that
Hmm.
definitely helps, right?
Hmm.
If optimism runs thick through your veins, it really has you looking at the positive situations first, right? It's looking through that lens. Like my wife makes fun of me all the time. She's like, "Why do you say this all the time?" And I always say, "Hey, well, the good news is, right? If something goes wrong or something goes in a sideways direction, I say, well, the good news is, right? I'm always
Hmm.
thinking about the
Hmm.
positive. So
Right.
if you can figure out how to shift and be more optimistic, that's obviously optimal. But for me, mindset is everything, right? It is the game. It is the game in business. It's the game in life. It's the game in sales, right? If you've got a bad attitude, guess who wants to be around you?
Mm.
Nobody.
Mm-mm.
And when you have a good one, it's
Right.
very attractive, right? And they're very contagious either way you look at them. A negative attitude is contagious. You ever been around people that are grumpy? What happens to you?
You
Naturally,
start getting grumpy,
you start to
right?
get grumpy. And what
Right.
about when you're with your friends and you're having a good time and you're hanging out?
Yeah.
That also
Yeah.
rubs off, right?
Right.
So,
Exactly.
I tell people in sales all the time, listen, um, there's not a whole lot we can control in life, but the one thing we can is our attitude.
Right.
I can't control the weather, can't
Right.
control the traffic or the accidents that might happen when I'm on the road, can't control a pandemic from happening and making me
Exactly.
work in my man cave for 3 months. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? But
Right.
I
Right.
can control my attitude. I
Right.
can choose how I'm going to react to the situation. So
Right.
if I were to give advice to anybody, it's like, where's your attitude at?
Right.
And do you recognize when you're not feeling a certain way? And
Right.
what are you doing when you recognize those emotions? Are you taking measures? You know, like to take deep breaths, right? I also maybe will take a walk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has their own coping mechanisms for when
Mm-hmm.
maybe you start to feel frustrated. And listen, everybody loses their attitude at some point. Right?
Yeah.
But some people do it more often than others. And listen, if you can figure out where that balance is for you, then that's how you can, start to see success, right? Because like I said, a bad attitude, right? That's leads to low emotional intelligence, meaning
Mm-hmm.
maybe you lose your temper quicker than somebody else does because
Right.
you don't know how to manage it and control it. And there's plenty of studies that have shown that people with lower EQ actually end up making less in their career because people don't want to work with people that have a bad attitude.
Right. Yeah. Emotional intelligence, EQ, is very important nowadays, because there's a lot of empathy that has to go into it. And in order for us to connect with other individuals in an empathetic way, we have to be positive, and we have to be accepting, and we have to be able to have those conversations with the different types of individuals. You mentioned something that I want to hone in, and you mentioned success, and you mentioned how to be successful from your point of view. And I think that from your experience, you were focusing on the metrics when you first started in LinkedIn. And all of a
Yep.
sudden, when you said, all right, I'm going to switch that mindset of focusing on the metrics and looking at how many people I have that liked or engaged or actually followed me, et cetera, et cetera. You started focusing on who you truly are, and you started developing that content that you really believe would add value to at least one person out there. If they
Yep.
watched it and they felt that it made a difference in their life, you would be happy with that. But you were coming from a different type of mindset, more of a positive mindset of helping others. So that in itself led to your success, not necessarily looking for that easy way to make money, easy way to make a sell, although marketing does convert into sales. But the branding portion kicked in and you said, I want to show the world who I truly am as Jordan Mendoza and say, this is what I believe, this is what I have to offer. And then off of that, success came to you because you started making those true empathetic emotional connections to the human aspect of the audience that you have started to accumulate. So I think that's part of the success that you've acquired so far. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, and listen, that's the whole reason why I wanted to get into a training role, right? Because I've been doing sales forever. My first job was at 14, going knocking on doors, trying to get people to sign up for the newspaper. Right, this is in 1995. There
Okay.
might be people listening that don't know what the newspaper is,
Right. Yeah, for
because
sure.
it's
Yeah.
it's not used very often anymore. And so, that first day, knocking on 100 doors, hearing every single person tell me no, that sucked. Right. That was the day on that day I learned a lesson that has stuck with me today. And because like everybody literally told me no, but what was happening over the span of from door 1 to door 100 is that I went from happy and cheery to literally seeing my attitude go into the gutter. So by the time I was probably at house 50, my face was probably like, you want to buy the newspaper? Like I was literally telling them to tell me no, right? Because
Right.
that's what happens when you get down into the dumps. And
Right.
so, I didn't want to go back for day 2. And I remember settling up and reluctantly handing over my clipboard to the guy at the distribution center. And he said, hey, it was a full clipboard. He said, hey, what happened out there? And I said, well, apparently nobody buys the newspaper. I was like, I'm ready to go. I was just unhappy. And he said, listen, I don't know if you'll understand this today, but one day, hopefully you will. And he said, the sale doesn't start until the customer says no. And I looked at him, I said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I kind of stormed off. And, I didn't really understand then, but I did go back for day 2. And I did figure some things out, right? Because when you're doing cold calling, it's all about strategy, right? Because you have about 5 seconds when they open that door or they're shutting it on you. So I had to get really creative. So I started paying attention to my environment. I started paying attention to flags that they may have in the window, the type of vehicles they had. Maybe was there art in the yard, right? I started looking for ways that I could potentially relate to people. And so that I could actually, when that door opened, I opened my mouth first and I mentioned something relatable to break that ice, right? Because once you can break the ice and you can get people comfortable in sales, it's a lot easier to communicate. There's no barrier anymore, right? So I started to really get good and to figure out how to effectively, communicate with people. And that was kind of first job in sales. And I did all types of sales after that. I did telemarketing, selling cell phones over the phone. This was in 96. So this is those big Nokia phones, my first 4 customers are all my buddies' moms, and it's just like literally over the phone, I'm selling these things. And if, in order to do that, you got to paint the picture really well. You have to be very descriptive because all you have is your voice.
Right, correct.
They
It's
can't
like
see
a
the product.
radio DJ,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
And they can't see the
it's tough.
product. They don't know. This cell phones are new. No,
Okay.
they didn't have one. Like they didn't, you know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
when I started doing that and I became like the top salesperson, I was like, man, like I've got something, like
Right.
the door to door thing was great, but like I can make some real money. And I was 16 making $800 a week. And,
Right.
I was
Right.
loving it. It was great.
Right.
But, and then I started selling shoes, like sneaker, so I did a lot of sales jobs, but I got into property management in 2007
Okay.
and we
That's
were,
around where the market crashed
yep.
on property
Yeah.
sales. Realtors kind of just took a bust on that. So how did you do? How did you finagle getting into the property
Well,
management at
so
that time?
this is in multifamily. So multifamily, although it was hit in '08, with that recession, it didn't get impacted nearly as much as real estate, right?
Mm,
Because with multifamily, it's like it's almost the type of industry that doesn't get impacted because everybody has to have some place to live. Like
mhm.
we all have to live somewhere.
Right.
And so there a lot of delinquency issues?
Hmm.
Absolutely, right? Like people that couldn't afford to pay because of job loss and things like that. But there in the multifamily industry, there are organizations out there that help, and there's religious organizations that help people that are short on rent. So I think people were able to get by during those times. But when I started, I got hired as a leasing professional. And so, listen, I'm doing landscaping for my dad. So we had moved up to Maryland from Georgia, doing landscaping. But something happens when it gets cold. If you're a landscaper,
Hmm.
you run out of work, right?
Right.
Because
Yeah. Yeah.
you can't cut the grass when there's snow on the ground or
Right. Right.
mulch
Right.
people's lawns.
Exactly.
So
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
so in that time, my dad was like, well, you might want to find another job because like
Right.
we're not going to be working probably until March.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I originally got a job with a window company. And while I was working for that window company, I walked into the leasing office one day to get a package, and they said, "Hey, you're very talkative when you come in here. You ever done sales?" It was just random, like they just asked me. And I said, "Yeah." Matter of fact, I've done a lot of sales, about 11 years to that point. And they said, "Well, we have an opening for a leasing professional. I think you should apply for it." So first question I had was, are there benefits? Right? Our
Hmm.
oldest, who's
Hmm.
now 15, was about 6 months old, and I didn't have benefits with my dad, and so this was a big deal.
Hmm.
And so they said yes. I applied for it. I interviewed. I got this job, right? And this is a whole
Hmm.
new world. I don't know anything about this industry in property management, but I
Hmm.
knew how to sell. So I had to figure out floor plans and features and benefits and amenities, and how I can take somebody from meeting them through a tour and have them make a $50,000 decision, right? A
Hmm.
legal
Hmm.
signing a legal document that's saying they're going
Right.
to pay us rent for 12 months, right? So
Right.
I got good at it. Within 6 months, I got promoted to assistant manager. Was in that role. I didn't like that role at all. I hate math, right? And you're
Okay.
calling people when they're late on rent. It wasn't a
Right.
very
Right.
fun
Right.
job at
Right.
all. But I knew I wanted to be a property manager at that point. So 9 months later, I get promoted to property manager. Actually, end up getting assistant manager of the year somehow. Don't know how I got that. Get
All right.
promoted to property manager. Ran a one person community, me and one maintenance associate, for about 10 months. Then I got a promotion to run two communities. And then they called me about 9 months later to manage a brand new lease up that was just being built in Virginia, our first property. There was going to be a REIT property in Virginia. So I get that position. I go manage there. And then, my wife gets a little homesick. So we end up relocating back to Georgia. I work at a couple communities, and then an opportunity comes up for learning and development manager. And this was in 2011. And I applied for it. I went up against a lot of people, a lot of different folks that applied for it. A lot more, in my opinion, more qualified people because they had degrees. I don't have a degree. I knew I
Hmm.
wasn't going to do college. I wanted
Yeah.
to do something in sales related, and
Hmm.
but I got it right. I applied for it. I got it, and um,
What do you think that you actually got that position over all those from your standpoint, overqualified or more qualified individuals that actually applied? What do you think stood out, made you
you know,
stand out a lot more?
well, listen,
Was it
I
your
think,
positiveness? Was it your
yeah,
mental mindset?
I think it was a culmination of things, but I think I was able to paint a good narrative of why I would be good in the role.
Mm,
And
okay.
so one of the things that I had mentioned to the person that interviewed and eventually hired me was that I have experience doing sales training. And that was going to be, I was part of it was going to build sales content, teach sales training. So I already had that, right? But the other thing was this, I was managing a team in 2011 with 558 unit property. We had 17 people on the team.
Mhm.
Half of them were office associates, so like three leasing agents, a leasing manager, an assistant manager, and then I had a whole service team, a grounds team. It was a big team, and a lot of the people that were on my team, my goal as a manager and my belief system is this: when you're a leader, you work for your team, not the other way around. Your job is to invest in them, to coach them, to teach them so that they can excel. Like I wanted to duplicate myself. So if you're a leasing professional, I wanted to get you to an assistant to a manager, and so on and so forth. And so that's what I did, and people got promoted. And so that was one of the things that I said. I was like, listen, my goal has always been to invest in other people. And in this role, that's what I'm going to be doing every single day, is facilitating training, giving people those aha moments, taking them from here and having them walk out here and have information that can help them grow in their position.
And then and then we get to the present moment where you're actually decided to be the host of your own podcast, blaze your own trail. First of all, how did you decide to name your show Blaze Your Own Trail? And how hard was it actually to launch it or to take that actual determination to actually launch it?
Yeah, so the show has a dual meaning. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and so I'm a big Portland Trailblazers fan.
Hmm.
Ever since I was a little kid, been a Trailblazers fan. So blaze your own trail, trailblazer, right? So
Hmm. Hmm.
that is part of the name's meaning.
Right.
But the other thing was, I've always been fascinated by that context of people that have blazed their trail. Martin Luther King Jr., Abraham Lincoln, these Lewis and Clark, these trailblazers that have done things, have faced adversity and got to success, right? Got
Hmm.
achieve the goals that they've wanted to achieve. So that's always been something that is hearing those stories has always inspired me. And I wanted to have a platform where I could be the one interviewing people to hear about those journeys and share that and add value to everyone that listens, because I firmly believe that every episode of mine adds value to someone, right? Some of them might have a heavier sports context or fitness, but there's value in all of them, right?
Right.
Because you can learn things from people's experiences and the lessons that they learn, and help you navigate your life, make a change or look at something a little bit differently than you did before you heard that lesson or that story or that experience.
Hmm. How did you first, obviously you had this mindset, but where did it actually start to come up with the idea of I'm gonna have my own podcast?
It's funny. I In 2019, I think it was around May. It was when I started creating content. I was like, man, like started hearing about podcasts. I was like, maybe I can have my own podcast. So I actually recorded a couple episodes, just me talking, solo
Hmm.
episodes, and I uploaded it to, I think, Buzzsprout, and I had a free account, and I don't think anyone's ever heard them. Like because I wasn't really, I think I called it the Living is Learning podcast, but I wasn't fully committed to the name, right? I wasn't, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just wasn't there yet.
Hmm.
Right. And so, like, if I think about it from an execution standpoint, I can easily see why that didn't get executed, because wasn't right. Like I wasn't in the right headspace. I didn't know, I didn't have a plan or a strategy. So it was later in the year, I think it was maybe September, October, I started thinking again. I started writing things down and thinking about, if I had a show, what would it be called? Who would I want my first guest to be? Who would I want my second, right? Started envisioning it and actually writing these things down and mapping it out.
Right.
And then I talked to my mentor, Brian Schulman, and I said, listen, I'm going to launch a podcast on January 1st. So now I've got a commitment. Now I've got a
You got a
date.
deadline. You got a deadline. You got to go
I've
for it.
told
Right?
somebody about it, right? My mentor, the guy that's helped me out. And so he said, I love it. And I said, listen, I would be honored if you'd be my first guest.
Oh.
So now I've got a accountability partner. I've got a date, and I've got my first guest, right? So, so it was on from there. So, and then it was like, all right, well, you don't want to just launch your show with one guest. So like, let's find your second guest. And, I made this list of guests, and I still have it somewhere. It's on a sticky note, and it was Gary Vaynerchuk is somebody that I want to get on the show eventually. He's on the list. Ed Milet's on the list. I put David Meltzer on the list. Charlie Jabley's on the list. And I put Heather Monahan on the list. These are like the 5 people. And
your top 5.
These are like the top 5 people. Right, so I just started reaching out, and I started messaging on, I think Instagram, LinkedIn, and, Heather responded, and she said, listen, I said, hey, listen, I really enjoy your content. I love your book. She had just launched a TED Talk at the time. I'd watched it. It was so inspiring. And I said, listen, I would love it if you could come on my show and be my guest on the podcast. And she's like, I would love it. I was like, holy cow. Like she answered, and then she said yes. Right. So, I had my 2 guests locked in, and then I knew I was going to do an introduction episode that would introduce what the show was all about. So I was going to launch on January 1st with 3 episodes. This was great. And so, I was building my brand at that point. So again, by December, I hit 20,000 followers. So at launch, I'm a little more than 20,000 followers on LinkedIn. And so I posted it out, and so I got very high engagement, a lot of downloads, because again, it was strategic, right? So when I think about the show that didn't happen, right, versus the show that did, I mean, there's some very clear things that happened, right? I got commitment, accountability. I lined up the guests, right? Of course, I invested in some equipment, a microphone. I spent $100 on a microphone and some headphones. I was committed. I was ready. And boy, I didn't know what I was waiting for, right? Because there's so much more that goes into it than just finding the guests and recording and the interview. What about post-production and editing and the marketing piece of it, right? So, but, I love every minute of the journey. Like I just enjoy it so much. I've already had over 50 interviews. I think I've recorded. I've released 31. Got 65 or so committed guests already, and more that want to come on. So it's been a crazy journey, because my goal was only to get to 50 for the year. Like I set that goal. I was like, I want to have 50 guests, and so now I think I could potentially double it. And that's just it's very crazy to think about that, but it's been so rewarding. I've met so many great friends, really connected and networked with a lot of guests that have come on, and we've built strong relationships. So it's been very, very rewarding.
You started mentioning the actual booking or scheduling of the guest, and you also mentioned the equipment that goes into the actual execution of the podcast and the post-production, because you record and then all of a sudden you have to edit some stuff out, or you have to put music, or you have to put some text in the actual video interview that you have. But what are the obstacles that you actually encountered, and how did you do? What are the major obstacles that you encountered, and how did you deal with them?
Well, I mean, I think the first obstacle that any new podcast host / producer has is like you have to think about, how am I going to get this in front of people? Because it's all about visibility. It's all about how many people are going to listen to this, and where do you find those? So I think I had an advantage, actually, because of the sales and marketing background and knowing how to drive traffic where I want to go. So I had a very strategic plan that I was going to teach myself how to create audiograms so I could do 1-minute clips and I could distribute that on every social media platform that I'm on. So, that they go on Facebook, the podcast Facebook page, they go on YouTube, in audio and video format. They'll go on, every podcast hosting site. Of course, they're distributed there, but they're on Twitter and they're on Instagram. So I made sure that I knew I wanted to market them, of course, contextual to each platform, but market these teasers and really drive as much traffic as I can, prior to the launch and then on launch day and then a couple days after, right? So I think having the background and being able, because I already knew how to edit videos, and I figured if I can edit video, I can edit a picture, add these things on, and so it was easy to figure out. So I didn't really have an obstacle there. I think for me, it was just getting comfortable was probably the biggest obstacle, and not being nervous, right? Because like I was going after like people that I looked up to, I had the pleasure of having David Meltzer on my podcast, who is so influential in the business space. And, so it was reminding myself that everyone I was going to interview was exactly like me.
Mm-hmm.
They were all human.
Mm-hmm.
They have all been new at something. They're all bleed red, right? So when I really put into that context that there was really no difference between us, but maybe time, like maybe they had more experience in certain things, then it started to get easier. It started to become more comfortable. I got more comfortable, even opening up more. And, it just, you just notice how you're changing as time goes along.
Right. Yeah. So, you started mentioning that you have people that you looked up to that you've been able to interview. Which one has been your more surprising guest that has told you yes that you brought in the show? I mean, you mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, and Ed Milet, and probably Lewis Howes is one. It's somewhere in there in that bunch, or
Yep.
maybe some other big names. But who has been or who would be your biggest surprise if they say yes to be on your show right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think Gary would be awesome. I think he's a guy that if you take what he says and you apply it, his information works. Like every time, like, and a lot of the stuff that he says, I'm like, oh, I actually did it that way. I maybe didn't call it that, so it just kind of almost validates things for you. So to have a guy like him on the show, it would be awesome, because I feel like I've consumed enough of his content that I know, you feel closer, who they are. So being able to get that opportunity, that'd probably be awesome. So it would definitely be awesome.
Fantastic. Good leaders always create good leaders. And do you have any individuals you actually look up to? Who are your mentors? You mentioned one of them, but who are the
It's, Brian Schulman definitely has been a mentor as far as, the LinkedIn space, really helping me with a lot of things. Actually, David Meltzer really has, become a mentor to me as well. I had him on the show and everything went well, and he started sending me, helping me get guests, that he thought I would add value to my show and that I would add value to them. And that was really that was a game changer, right? You have somebody like that, their mission is to add value, but when they actually do that mission and you get to experience who they are, that it's very validating, and it's very, you just feel honored when people that are in a position of influence, that you get to be a part of that,
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a very valuable relationship that kind of sprang from you pursuing this path. That's amazing. What do you believe your superpower to be? If you have one, or if you don't believe you have one, which superpower from any superhero would you select, and why?
Well, I mean, I think my superpower has always been communicating through stories. I think that's one thing that I've always been able to do, even thinking back to my childhood. But if there was a superpower that I could have, it would definitely be teleportation.
Oh, wow.
Because I
Okay.
mean, like, there's some days you wake up and it's like, man, I wish I could hang out with my brother that's all the way across the country. Like,
Right.
boom, you're there, right? Like,
Right.
you can see anybody at any time in any place. So that would
You've
be
ever
one I
seen
would choose.
the show Flash? The Flash?
Yeah.
Oh, do you know the guy named Cisco in that show?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
He buys and he can
Yep.
teleport, and so that's kind of what we're talking about, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, fantastic. That's pretty cool. Do you have any particular book, movie, or podcast that you believe has made an impact in your life, and you wish more people actually would take advantage to benefit from it? What are those that you could share with us?
Yeah, so there's a book, and I use it in the 6-month leadership program that I teach. It's called Learn Like a Leader, and there's several different. It's like a big compilation of stories from authors, and it gives you context into their journey, and you learn a valuable lesson in every single chapter. So, to me, if I'm consuming anything, it's got to add value, right? And that's a book. Like that book has added a lot of value to me. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni is another book that I enjoyed. Start with Why by Simon Sinek, another book that I've enjoyed, and Emotional Intelligence 2.0, another great one that actually gives you an EQ assessment you can take and populates your results and gives you context into how you can increase, your awareness, your management, your relationship management, as well as your social setting. So that's a really, really good book as well.
Awesome. And obviously, Gary Vee's podcast, that would be something that
Oh,
people should
absolutely.
listen
Yeah,
to,
the
right?
Gary Vee audio experience,
Definitely.
Dave Meltzer's The Playbook,
Right,
Heather Monahan's Confidence Creator. Those
right,
are ones that I
right. That you
definitely
consume
would.
and you listen to and you
Yeah, I
follow
listened.
them.
I listened to him. It became very surreal when you get your podcast alerts and your own show pops up next to these people,
Oh,
right? I know
wow.
it's not
Yeah.
next to them, but on
Right.
my phone it is. So
It is,
it looks
right?
cool. Your logo pops up there.
Right.
But no,
Right.
all of those people are super inspiring, and I think,
Right.
I think the important thing that I learned, because there's plenty of times in my life where I didn't take action or I didn't know what direction I wanted to go in.
Yeah.
And so I tell a lot of people all the time, when you create action, that action turns into momentum. The momentum shifts to consistency, and that consistency is what creates results. And when you
Exactly.
can do that continuously, because everything's about repetition, when you can do it,
Yeah.
then magic things start to happen, right? When you start to take action. So that's that's advice I try to give people as often as I can, because listen, I've been the stagnant person. Yeah, I've been the person that
Yeah. And I
maybe
think
was
all of
afraid
us
to
to a
take that
certain
leap.
I think
Yeah.
all of us to a certain degree are stagnant at some point.
Yeah.
So, if we heed advice from others and we start moving forward, it might be slow at first, but as you repeat and repeat and repeat, you start building momentum and you start getting more confident and you start going a little faster and then you start seeing more result on whatever you want to achieve. So that's really cool advice. That being said, what is your definition of success at this point? You've achieved getting your own podcast, you've achieved being a senior manager, a professional training individual at a high corporation level without really having a college education where you beat out a whole bunch of other individuals. So that's success in itself. You have a beautiful family that you live over in the East Coast with. But right now, what is your definition of success?
Well, honestly, I mean, I've had some wins, but I don't think I've truly achieved it yet.
Okay.
I don't feel like I don't feel like I'm there yet. I feel like I'm on the journey,
Mhm.
and every journey has different seasons in the journey. So
Mhm.
I feel like I'm in a good season right now,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, and so, for me, what success looks like is being to impact as many people with the message that I have. Whether, I've been doing, since COVID hit, I've been doing a lot of speaking engagements at virtual summits. And that's been so amazing, just sharing some of my story with other people, and getting feedback from people of how, wow, like, I can't believe that happened to you, or man, you're making me look at things a little bit differently. Like, to me, that's everything, being able to help other people achieve success. So that's what, I love coaching people, and, taking somebody that feels like they're stuck, but realizes that if they make a couple little tweaks or a couple, shift their perspective in a certain way, that they can be and do the things that they want to do. Like, that's, to me, what success looks like.
So being
It's
able to
much
help
less about
individuals.
me winning, right? It's great that I have these things, but when you have things and when you have a platform, to me, it's being able to add that back to other people and help them out as well.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yes. So being able to help other people achieve their success, that is what success for you looks like
That's what it
in a
looks like.
personal level. That's awesome. This last question, I really enjoy asking every single guest that I have in the show, because I want you to imagine that you can go back to that 12, 13-year-old boy who is a seventh grader playing that Mortal Kombat 2 with your favorite character in that video game console. And I want you to envision that you can buy yourself back and go and teleport to that time. What would you tell that individual at that exact moment, right after he gets released from the police car, that could definitely help you get to where you're at, or get to where you envision your success to be a lot faster? If you can share 3 pieces of advice for that child, what would it be?
I would say that everybody makes mistakes. You're going to grow from this, and don't take it personal. No, I think that's probably the best advice that I could give to them, because I think I probably did all the opposites, at certain points. So that would probably be what I would say.
Right. No, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for sharing those pieces of advice with us. Thank you for, making time to be on the show tonight. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I want to acknowledge you for being such a giving individual, for striving to be successful, for striving to actually support other individuals to achieve their success, which in turns turn into your successes. So I really want to acknowledge you for that. And everybody, I want you to follow Jordan's podcast, Blazing Your Own Trail. That is essentially a really good podcast. So follow Jordan. I will go ahead and leave his LinkedIn account so you can connect with him, reach out to him, and make sure that you ask him any questions and be able to allow him the honor of helping you and supporting you. With that being said, I want to thank everybody, the audience, for Success Innovation. This has been a really awesome experience with me, with talking to Jordan. This has been Lázaro Herrera from Success Innovation. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye. Thank you for finishing another wonderful episode with Success Innovation. Today we learned so much about Jordan Mendoza. We get to know him at a personal level. I personally was mesmerized with his story about being a young boy and how he was always ready to hustle. It was motivating to hear him speak about Bless Your Own Trail and how he strives to help others along the way with his venture. Thank you, Jordan Mendoza, for all you do. This is Lázaro Herrera for Success Innovation. See you next time. Bye-bye.